Welcome back to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. On today's episode, I interview Dr. Debi Silber, the founder of the Post Betrayal Transformation Institute, a holistic psychologist, world-renowned speaker, and author. Now sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I introduce this beautiful lady here, Dr. Debi Silber, who you guys are going to enjoy, I read her bio, and it's like the who's who in the zoo and who's media shows she's been on, TV shows, books she's written, things she's accomplished. I'm really excited to talk to her. But before we talk to her, first, ask everybody to please download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeart, iTunes, wherever you listen to audio podcasts. Please do that. The automatic download is important because it allows me to really stay on top of my metrics and helps you guys get the podcast without having to really think about it. Where can you learn more about me? You can go to mattcubbler.com. And if you want to learn more about my book that I wrote, A Brother's Love, a Memoir, I wrote this book going on, that's 15 years, a little over 15 years ago. It's a book about my life growing up with my brother, Andy. Andy was autistic and stuttered profusely, and sadly was killed in a car accident in 1989. And it just details our life together and the privilege I had of being his brother for 18 years, and the trauma of losing your best friend and how I didn't handle that very well, but then how I came out the other side. And it's kind of a triumph over tragedy kind of inspirational book. So if you want to learn more about that, go to mattcubbler.com. All right, without further ado, Debi, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on.
First of all, I'm jealous. Well, granted, we may have the same temperature, probably close to Philadelphia and San Diego, but the humidity level and the view is probably a little different out in San Diego.
It's beautiful here. I bounce back and forth between New York and San Diego. You know, as I was mentioning before we started, 3 out of my 4 kids live here. So there's no way this mama's staying away. So I go back and forth.
Love that. I love, my wife and I are very connected. We have 2 kids, and their happiness and their joy and their success is really our primary focus in life. And I enjoy being around my kids. So it's good to see another parent who enjoys being around their kids.
Oh, we love it. We had 2 of my San Diego kids came in for my nephew's wedding. And so my husband, now wanting to just celebrate everything, said, well, 2 of the kids are in. Why don't we get the other kids in, and then we'll all go to Universal Studios and relive their childhood, but like as adults. It was the most fun trip ever.
Sounds like it. I think your husband and I would get along very, very well. I like doing those kinds of things and just sort of, I believe your life is a segments of moments that are all connected. They're not individually segmented out. They're all individually segmented in. And when you give value to each one of those segments and can see how the journey got to where you are and how your kids got to who they are and how you guys became who you were, I think that's cool to go back and reflect on that. When you write a book about your life story, it kind of forces you into that mindset. So I can appreciate the joy wanting to relive some of those cool moments when they were younger.
Yeah. And now it's coming from such a whole healed place. We are a new family. It's the same characters, but all so completely different after we've all healed from intense trauma.
Yeah. And we're probably wish we had 3 hours, but we have about 45, 50 minutes. So I'm going to jump to the chase. I didn't give you any heads up until about 5 minutes ago what the show's about and how it works. But I asked one question. And the reason I asked this question, the way I ask it is because as a cop, when I'm interviewing a suspect or I'm interviewing a victim, I don't really know where their brain's at. I don't know a whole lot about them. It gives me a lot of understanding of what they're initially thinking about when I ask this question. Because I could ask you this question and you can answer it in one way, but I could research you and think that you're answering it another way. So it's that perspective understanding that really helps me as an investigator and as an interviewer come up with my questions later. So I asked one question, and that question is, who is Dr. Debi Silber?
Yeah, Dr. Debi Silber now is someone who is absolutely on purpose and doing what I am here to do. I mean, I've been through a lot, and I really feel like everybody, and I'm no different from anybody else, but if you've learned something profound, it's an obligation to share that with other people to shorten their learning curve. So in my case, it was, and I've been through death of a loved one, I've been through disease, I've been through all of that, but it was the betrayal of my family. And I thought I healed from that and did what I needed to do. And a couple of years later, it was my husband. And I was like, what the heck? So I got him out of the house and I was like, all right, what's common to those two experiences? And I realized, and certainly it wasn't my fault, but I looked at it and I said, I never taken my own needs seriously. It was always about everybody else. So with 4 kids, 6 dogs, and really a thriving business, I was like, you know what? Now it's my turn. So I enrolled in a PhD program in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential, because I was changing. I didn't quite understand it. He was too on his own, wasn't ready to look at that. And then it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to you lie, cheat, and deceive? That study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my business, my family, my life.
Wow. Jesus Christ. That's just, I'm like, I'm having like a little bit of like flashback sweats just from you telling that little bit of of an awakening that happened for you.
Mhm.
For me, I've had betrayals in my life, and I try to think. I'm an intentional guy, so
Mhm.
everything I do has to have a purpose and intention. And I don't, whether it's posting a post on Facebook or putting out a podcast or having a conversation or raising my children, I try to be very intentional in my actions and my efforts. And I don't think I've ever betrayed, at least not intentionally, betrayed
Mhm.
anybody.
Mhm.
I've been betrayed. I've had, I was engaged when I was in the military, and you know, partner cheating on me not once but twice, for 3 times. And then my reaction to that was not healthy.
Mhm.
So I can only imagine taking a deep dive, because I've thankfully I use this phrase that every bad relationship is an awakening to who you're actually looking for.
Yeah.
So it allows you to take those, if you look at it as a learning process, to take the things you pro and con from those relationships and use it to formulate that opinion of who you're actually looking for in your life partner. It led me to my wife of now 27 years. So for me, I don't look at it as a negative. I look at it as a thankfulness component. But at the time, it sucked ass, right? So
Oh,
it
yeah.
was the worst. So, and I mentor kids, and kids go through it constantly with my boyfriend broke up with me and my girlfriend broke up with me. And so
Mhm.
managing those in the moment, super huge problems, but in the grand scheme of life, probably not as monumental as they're making it, but it doesn't minimize the fact that it's traumatic at the time.
Oh,
So,
it's hugely traumatic. I mean, this is the person, these are the people who gave us a sense of safety and security. So when that's the person, these are the people to shatter that sense of safety and security. It's traumatizing for sure.
the question. So my initial, just because my background is in human behavior and body language
Mhm.
and mentoring kids. I don't have a lot of time mentoring adults because, quite frankly, they annoy the shit out of me. So I'm not gonna lie, that's just my interest level is very low in
Yeah.
fixing people that have way too many moving parts and broken bones to try to put them back together again. But
Mhm.
in your study, and this is just an aside, did you study a specific age group, or was it a broad spectrum trauma from betrayal?
Yeah. I studied betrayal later in life, and because I there were so many differences between childhood experiences. Did it contribute to later in life? Sure. But I wanted to study the lived experience of someone who was betrayed by a family member, a partner later in life. And it's funny because, well, it's funny. In the beginning, I was studying when you've been betrayed by a family member, partner, or friend. And I dropped the friend part because although a friendship betrayal can infuriate you, make you crazy, make you nuts, it doesn't break you. Of course, we're never broken, bent, you know what I mean? But they don't break you like the family, like the partner. So I wanted that experience. I wanted to understand the before, the during, the after, the entire lived experience of when, as an adult, you're betrayed by a family member or a partner. And those 3 discoveries, it was shocking. But and I'm happy to share them, just so obvious, but we don't realize how traumatic it truly is. Betrayal, and through the research I've seen, it is one of the most traumatic of the human experiences.
But it's such a reason why when I thanks shout out to Alex Sanfilippo, who's the founder of Podmatch, which is how we got connected. And
Mhm.
Alex was a guest on my show a while back, and before Podmatch was a thing, and really entrepreneurial spirited kind of younger man. So he's thank you for making this match. But what really I get a lot of messages, and not everybody's a fit for the show. But what I really was interested in was anything psychological, anything to do with trauma, anything to do with uh, really not something that you talk about a lot. There's not a lot of people doing what you're doing, which is discovering the psychological, physical, and emotional trauma that comes from betrayal.
Yeah.
But everybody goes through it. Like you can't make it through life without dying, paying taxes, or being betrayed. Like that's a reality, and nobody really puts a lot of emphasis on the betrayal part. They just assume you'll get over it, and then you'll find somebody new. And I now that when I was preparing for the show mentally, I'm like my betrayals in my life, like they still sucked today. Like they're still like a little slight jab in the heart that you think about, like, why did that happen? Like, what did I do to contribute to it? Or what, like those thoughts that go into your head
Mhm.
when you were doing your study with the PhD, and you said you found these three groundbreaking discoveries.
Mhm.
What was the first one that you discovered? And was it this like holy crap like moment?
Yeah, each one of them was a holy crap moment. And the first one was that, I had been through, like I said, I had been through disease. I was in the ICU for 11 days. It's a miracle I'm alive. I had been through death of a loved one. So I understood trauma, but I was like, you know what? Betrayal feels different for me. And originally I was studying something called post-traumatic growth, which is because kind of, if you imagine an upside of trauma, how any trauma, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, whatever it is, leaves you with a new awareness, perspective, insight you didn't have. And I was like, yes, but there's something different about betrayal. And I was like, I don't want to assume. So let me ask all my study participants. And I did. And I said, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Hands down, unanimously, they said, oh my gosh, it's so different. Here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the whole self has to be rebuilt because it's been shattered. Abandonment, rejection, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust. So when you rebuild all of that, it doesn't quite qualify as post-traumatic growth because it's like post-traumatic growth plus rebuilding the self. So I coined a new term, which is now called post-betrayal transformation, and that is the complete and total rebuild after betrayal. And that's really what it is. Because of how personal it feels, right? Like when you lose someone you love, you may not feel like trust is shattered. It may not affect your confidence, right? But with betrayal, there is that shattering of the self.
I think that's so important for people to separate trauma as a macro can
Hmm.
be lumped together because there's just commonalities amongst all traumas.
Hmm.
When you micro it out, there's a very you can put a lot of traumas still micro into the same box, but
Hmm.
betrayal really does feel personal. It feels intentional, and I think when my brother died, it was personal to me because I was angry at God. Like
Hmm.
God betrayed me,
Hmm.
so I was angry, and that was that. And just thinking about what we were going to talk about today, like I was thinking all the betrayals and where were the most hurtful ones, the ones that really resonated with me and left a burn in my gut that I just couldn't get rid of for a long period of time that just I didn't handle well. And that personality, the person, I don't know, personality, the personalness of it, the
Hmm.
intentionality of it is what really separates it. I think that's really um, groundbreaking to for people, and it's not rocket science. If you, but it's so like, oh no, well, why didn't I think of that, right? Like, so it's so important to see that there is differences between them, and you can't treat them, I'm sure, as a psychologist the same way because you have to break it down a whole lot different than you do death or disease or whatever. When you decided to go down this path, did you have a plan? Like, were you looking at it and going, "This is where I see this going, and what I want to turn it into," or was it this sort of genuine, soul searching, life affirming, and then boom, here's a obviously a very productive business model that you're in now. So how did that all come to be?
It really was. I was in so much pain, and I just resolved just to put my head down and not pick it up until I was out the other side. And I said, if I can heal from this, I'm taking everybody with me. That's just it. That's just it. I had no idea what it was going to look like, but I was not going to numb, avoid, distract. I was not going to divert my attention. I was going to face it. We have a saying in the within the PBT, Post Betrayal Transformation Institute, and it's face it, feel it, heal it. And that's exactly what I was going to do. And it was dark, and it was terrible, and it was awful. And I just told my kids, hey, I'm not going to be my best, but I love you with every cell of my being. You're going to see some raw, real. I'm not going to hide. I'm going to be there for you as best I can. But you're going to see crash and burn, and you're going to see rebirth. Just watch.
That's a great, first of all, I love learning about something with the audience because, like I said, I read your bio and that was the extent of my research, which is normal for me. Because I'm getting all these thoughts are popping in my head as you're mentioning key words that really resonate with me. Your kids, and I'm going to make an assumption that their father betrayed you.
Yeah. It was my family, and then my husband. And actually, he was the one who told them. And I think one of the reasons why he had this earth-shattering awakening as well was not only did he lose me, but when you sit your 4 teenagers down and they look at you and they're like, you did what to mom? If anything is going to have you fall from grace and wake up and realize what matters, it's that. And one of the things I also learned was how to know if it's safe and in your best interest just to heal and move on. And that's what I did with my family. It just wasn't an option to rebuild with them. And how to know if it's safe and in your best interest, if you're willing, if you want to heal and rebuild something entirely new with the person who hurt you. So not long ago, my husband and I married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress. Our 4 kids is our bridal party. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done, because injustice and integrity are highest on my list. So this was a call for me to face every demon, every shadow, everything.
Well, first of all, kudos on the bravery to be able to forgive and grow and build and trust again. I mean, that's gigantic. I'm not nearly as evolved as you. I'm a little Neanderthal than you are. I'm a bridge nuker. I'm not necessarily a bridge builder by trade. But you mentioned something just a second ago. So my dad, my biological father, and I haven't spoken since 1996. I spent my parents divorced when I was 9 months old. Having an older brother who was learning disabled and stuttered, and so it was tough for my mom to be a single mom working 3 jobs, living in projects, and a dad who was never present and never came through on anything, never lived up to a promise, never showed up when he was supposed to, whatever. I spent my entire life trying to get my dad to give a shit.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point in time, like you said, sometimes you have to make that decision on what is best for you. And what was best for me was to end my relationship with my dad because it was toxic. And all it was doing was I was grasping at ghosts and never moving forward, just constantly in this circle of frustration and heartbreak and disappointment. So I get that immensely with the family part. The kid, I always imagine, I'm a cop. I don't go into happy homes. It's just not. I'm asked, and excuse my French, to unfuck people's problems in like 5 minutes. That's what they want, and I have to solve all the world's problems for them in that moment. I have to do it to their satisfaction. Most of them are broken families, so I see that a lot.
Yeah,
I don't see a Dr. Debi Silber story very often, where there's this broken trauma, fixing through shit show, and then rising above out of the ashes a new and better entity. How hard? First of all, what was that psychological process that you had to go through to get? Because like I said, I'm a nuker. Like you hurt me, done. I don't have a forgiveness bone in me. I will forgive if it was not intentional.
Right.
But if you intentionally did something to hurt me, we are dead.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
And that's why this was by far, hands down, the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, like I said, I was sitting in ICU for 11 days. It's a miracle I'm alive. I lost my mom. Like, so I know loss, I know pain. Nothing was as hard for me as this, because, this was the deal breaker. And it was. And so here was the crash and burn. And it was like, okay, well, now that's it. That was the deal breaker. You broke the rules. Over, done. And what I see so often is, it is only in the complete and utter death and destruction of the old does the new have a chance to emerge. And I had no idea what I wasn't interested in the new him, right? What's this new me going to be? And it's really incredible, because you can't plan it. You have no idea what this healthy, whole, healed version is going to look like. But I just said, I am just going to do whatever it takes to move through this. And it was interesting, because I still had private clients at the time coming to see me, and they were asking, like, how are you doing this? And I was like, I don't even know. I was coming up with processes. I was coming up with insights. I was just practicing what I was learning from the research, and it was working. And it was allowing for every one of the most intense, painful, they would take me down. And, sometimes it was just hard to even get through the day. And I'll even remember, and I wrote about it in Trust Again, which is my latest book. And that's really the dissertation, made reader friendly, right? Because I'm like, who sees this besides 3 research committee people? There's no way.
All that work. That's it. That's
500
right?
plus hours. That's going to be a book. And I just kept implementing, and I just kept saying, okay, so, and I remember looking at this also, I pictured this transformation tunnel. I don't know how I just pictured it, and I said, where are you in all this? And I'm like, I'm 10% in. I don't even see light out the other side. I see nothing. And I would keep checking with myself, where are you? You know what? 40. You know what? 50. I see some light there, but I am nowhere close. And I just kept trying new things. And I didn't even speak to him early on. I mean, of course, with the kids, I had to. But this was about me now. Every rule was changing. Every limiting belief I had about myself, everything I had done to make everybody else happy, all the rules were going to change. And that's what's so interesting about betrayal, too. It lends itself to creating an entirely new identity. You take the parts of you like, and you let go of everything that doesn't serve. And that's what I did.
I love that, because, and as you're speaking, I'm picturing shit that I did in my head, right? Like, that's what, like, that wasn't how I handled that. Like, in my head, I'm like, whoop, that wasn't me. But typically in betrayal, if you're the one betrayed and you are in love and you were so surprised that this person that you trusted in, and all of a sudden there's this, why would they do this to me? Your first reaction, and as a guy, it even happened to me. Like I said, I took my girlfriend, then fiance at the time when I was in the military, back 3 times. And it's because I was trying to fix me for her. Like, how do I put myself into a place where I'm back into this number 1 priority slot for her? Not how do I fix me so I don't need her, or if her wants to come back in, then she's got to prove to me that she's worthy of me. Instead of having that shift, it was fix me for her.
Yeah.
When did you come up with this idea of the separation, the rebirth and rebuilding of yourself, independent of the person who betrayed you, without that being the focal point?
Yeah. I'm going to show you something with my hands. You will never forget this. Ready? When we're in relationships, we're like this. And then all of a sudden there is that death and destruction of the old. There's that betrayal. There's that whatever it is. And then here's what typically happens. We want to heal ourselves. We want to grow. We kind of do this thing, but that person's here. So you know what we do? We keep doing this. And I did 2 TEDx talks. My first was about how we sabotage ourselves, right? So we do this and we keep doing this, but we like it here. This feels good. We're helping ourselves physically, mentally, and emotionally, but we keep doing this because that's where that person is. That wasn't my intention at all. I was willing to do this, and that was my only intention. I was going to be there for my clients, my kids, me, period, done. Now, what happens is when you are so committed to being here, living here, not deviating from here, and this person's here, the only thing that happens typically is this, right? Where they're like, what the heck happened to you? And you're like, oh, I don't have the least bit of interest in you, right? Or this, each go your own ways. Or this person says, I better step up to meet the strength of that person here, or you just outgrow each other, but this can't help but show up. My only interest was getting here. I wasn't thinking about it. On his own, his only interest was getting here. So when we remarried, it was as two completely transformed people. The worst thing that people can do that I see all the time is they feel so broken and they feel like such a half. And that whole you complete me thing, I hate that. So they say, I need to find another half so I can become whole. Well, what the heck happens if something happens with that person? So the whole idea is make yourself whole, complete, healed. From that space, you meet someone else if you want to, if you're ready, and then you become a power couple. I wasn't willing to do it any other way. And because from that place of strength, I was good on my own. And that I was like, you know what? Either I'm the poster child for betrayal or I'm doing something really big with this. And I didn't know any more, but I just knew I had to heal.
There's so many things popping into my head. Question for you, and this is, you may not have even researched this, but I think it's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a developmental component to this in psychology of raising? Because like I said, human behavior is my background. I'm labeled an expert in it, whatever. But that's just because of my profession and my life and growing up with a brother who couldn't speak. I had to really understand human behavior and body language and all those things in order to communicate with my brother. So, and I've used it very well in my career. But when I mentor kids, one of the things I'm finding is that when you intentionally help kids identify who they are early on, and that allowing for that growth of their personality and who they're going to become, but the core principles of their personality, to really know who that is so that they can identify shifts in things and things that interest them or don't interest them, or things they're good at or things they suck at. All those things that come with evolving as a young person into an adult. Do you think there is a component of, because the part you just mentioned is critical, where having someone be independently happy and independently capable of surviving on their own, but maybe made more enhanced with another person in their life, but not necessarily less enhanced if they're not? Is there a process, you believe, in the evolution of children to get them to a point where they're more maybe acclimated to trauma of betrayal, if it were to ever happen?
It's a great question. And I really see this as, how do you know if you're headed in that place where you're, here's what I'm going to share. And these are 4 questions that I invite everybody to write down, which is my way of saying write this down. When we're numbing, avoiding, and distracting, that's how you know what used to work doesn't work anymore. What used to make sense doesn't make sense anymore. What used to feel good doesn't feel good anymore. Here's the thing. That's where you're supposed to look and say, well, what am I outgrowing? What do I need? What am I ready for? But what happens with so many people is we're so afraid of listening to that voice. So we use food, drugs, alcohol, reckless behavior, numbing of anything, so we don't feel or face it. And it's when we start doing that, that's when we're headed for trouble. So I didn't do that. Like if I'm feeling any sort of discontent, I'm not looking to run away from it. I'm looking to run to it, saying, what is it that we need right now? What's going on here? So in the case of my husband, there was this discontent, and it's always within that person. That's the biggest thing with betrayal. Even though it happens to you, it's not about you. It's really not. You're the unlikely recipient of the behavior, but it's not about you. So if someone is, and a child or an adult, if they're numbing, avoiding, distracting, that's how you know they're headed for something bad. So the 4 questions would be, am I numbing, distracting? If so, how? Call yourself on it. Do you walk into the kitchen, you're not the least bit hungry, and you start numbing out that voice that's trying to tell you something? Do you walk into a room, you put on the TV just to drown out the sounds of your own thoughts, right? Second question, what am I pretending not to see? Am I pretending not to see there's trouble in my relationship? Am I pretending not to see that health issue that needs my attention? Am I pretending not to see I hate my job? What am I pretending not to see? Third question, what's life going to look like in 5 to 10 years if I keep this going? Play it all the way out. Ignore that relationship issue. Play it out 5 to 10 years. Ignore that health issue 5 to 10 years. Ignore that job issue 5 to 10 years. What's it going to look like? We don't do that, but we need to play it full out. The fourth question, what could life look like in 5 to 10 years if I changed now? I'm not saying it's easy. Transformation happens when you tell yourself the truth.
That's so true. Life is pretty complicated when you're in the weeds, right? When you're constantly in the weeds and the noise is drowning you, life gets really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I tell when I'm talking to other people that have been in combat or high intensity situations or trauma or whatever, and you sound like someone who thrives in chaos. Like your brain can pick out the important pieces and use it and filter in order to become really productive and solve problems, complex problems. Because going through trauma, as you're living through it and then doing a PhD at the same time, and then having clients and being a mom and all the other shit that goes with life, that's chaos.
Yeah.
And your brain was working at this ultra high level of focus. Because when you train hard for combat and SWAT or military, whatever, and you're going into a place where you know people have guns and they're going to shoot at you the minute you go through the door, when you go through that door, one of two things is going to happen. Either the noise is going to overtake you and you're going to make mistakes and someone's going to get hurt, maybe you or one of your teammates, or it's like on a golf course when you see like the Tiger Woods on the 18th of the Masters needs a birdie to win, and there's hundreds of people lining the tee box, which I would nail the first one to the right with a golf ball. There's no doubt in my mind. But for some reason, they're able to block all that noise out and focus only on where they're putting the ball. And the same thing in chaotic environment in law enforcement or military is all of a sudden things slow down. Mm-hmm. I was in a shooting once where I was watching, as I was shooting, I was watching the rounds come out of my gun, and I was watching the trajectory of how they were falling, and I was counting them as they were going while I was doing everything else and remembering everything that was in the room. Mm-hmm. I could tell you what picture was where on the wall.
Yeah.
During a massive chaotic event. And the reason I bring that up is when we get lost in the weeds, we see nothing. When we have the ability to focus in chaos, which is a trained thing, it's not necessarily DNA, it's not necessarily genetics, it's a trained event. When you train your brain to handle chaos, trauma, whatever that is, that's how we become elite level human beings who are adaptable and adjustable and can rise to the occasion, or whatever the term you want to choose. Mm-hmm. And I think for people who are going through betrayal, I think that's probably one of the hardest to recover and rise through because of that intentionality of it, of that hurtfulness, that you really wanted to hurt me. Like that is such a jagged edged knife in the gut that you can't always get out of the noise. How did you find yourself? Was it a, and then I got a follow-up question to this. Was it a, as you mentioned earlier on that you were just going to focus on yourself, you're going to be laser focused, go through the process. When did you get to that? Like that first initial, what the F just happened?
Yep.
And like, how long did that last before your elite level mind focused trauma chaos liver kicked in?
You know, I think my timing, it's not fair to say that my timing would be right for everybody, because keep in mind, I was immersing myself in this work at the PhD level. So I was learning, implementing. I was my own guinea pig and own case study through this too. So, and I also saw there were 3 groups in the study who did not heal. And I was very aware of that. So I was very aware of what not to do. The first group was the group who they just were not accepting their betrayal. Nope, they had their story, they were sticking with it. The second group was the group that was numbing, avoiding, distracting. And I was like, okay, it may have been a bit easier to get through the day, but it kept them stuck. I was like, all right, I'm not doing that either. The third group was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So this was where, out of religious reasons, that was a big one. Fear, financial fear, not wanting to break up a family, whatever it was. They just tried to overlook it, tried to put it aside. I saw two things with that group. Number one, only a further deterioration of the relationship. And the second thing, that group by far was the most physically sick. So I saw what wasn't working and I was like, okay, I'm not doing that. I just don't even know what this is going to look like, but I am just unwilling I am unwilling to distract myself. I am unwilling to make it easy on him. And I'm also unwilling to make it easy on me. And if I'm recreating a new me here and he's recreating a new him, that's nice and all, but my only intention is to be authentic for the kids, to be there for my clients, and just to grow from the rubble that was left in the wake of my family right now.
So
I don't know if I answered your question, but
you did.
that's what
And my
happened.
follow-up question to that is, had you not been in the position where you were going to pursue this PhD level investigation into the psyche of betrayal, going back, if you could pretend that it didn't happen the way it happened, what would have been your go-to prior to, would it still have been the same end result, or because the reason I'm asking the question is, was the PhD and that the program the thing that forced you into laser focus, attention, chaos management level brain hyperfunction, or is that naturally who you would have always been? Take out the PhD component, would you have still gotten to the same end place?
I was never someone to run from anything, because I always looked at it like, okay, if I'm experiencing this particular trauma right now, there's got to be a reason and there's got to be something about this that's going to make me stronger, better, wiser. So go through it. It's going to suck. It's going to be the worst thing ever. It's going to be hard. It's going to be traumatic. Your health's going to crash because of all the stress. But at the end of the day, you're going to have this new awareness, insight, something that you didn't have. Because remember, my first betrayal was my family. So healing from all that craziness took just about everything I had. But I also looked at it like, okay, how can I benefit my own kids from this experience with my own trauma? So I always looked at something like, I don't know how it's going to look. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be messy. It's going to be sticky. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that's got to be better than the feeling of being a victim. That I can't tolerate. I just can't live with that. Or that's got to be better than the feeling of, you won. Okay, poor me. I guess this is just where I live right now. And it's interesting. We only talked about one of the discoveries, but this was so appropriate, where I saw it show up with one of the other discoveries, which was that while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many of us do, if we're going to fully heal, we're going to move through 5 now proven predictable stages. And what's so exciting about that is we even know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every one of those stages. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. Why is that good? Because now we know healing is predictable. Most people get stuck in stage 3. Transformation doesn't even happen until stage 4 and 5. Most people, and if I wasn't careful, I would have gotten stuck in that stage 3, just like everybody else.
What were those? While we're here, might as well, because I'm kind of, my brain, like I said, I have no. When you don't have a plan, it kind of makes an hour kind of a roller coaster. You have no idea where to do. But I have 45,000 things in my brain going on right now. But what are those 5 steps that you just mentioned?
That was the most exciting of the discoveries. I mean, the other one, and I can share that too after, but this was a thrill because I felt like now there's a lifeline. Now, when you're betrayed, you know what stage you're in. Like, so this is what I have to do to get to the next stage and the next stage. So it was thrilling. So the first was like a setup stage. And I saw this with every single study participant, me too. If you imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, what I saw with everybody was this real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, kind of neglecting the emotional and the spiritual. What does that look like? Looks like we're really good at thinking and doing, not really prioritizing the feeling and being. If we're just thinking and doing, easy to topple over, just like a table with 2 legs, right? That's what happened. Stage 2, by far, hands down, the scariest of all the stages. This is shock. This is trauma. D-Day, discovery day. This is like when that person takes the mask off and reveals who they've been this whole time. I talk about this in my second TEDx, Do You Have Post Betrayal Syndrome? So here's where you ignite the stress response. Now it's the breakdown of the body, the mind, the worldview. You ignite the stress response. You are now headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You can't wrap your mind around what you just learned. And your worldview is shattered. Your worldview is your mental model. These are the rules. This is how life works. Don't go there. Trust this person. In one moment, every rule has been shattered. And your bottom is bottomed down on you, and there's no other new bottom yet. Terrifying. Anyway, if you were to walk down the street and the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything and everything you could to stay safe and stay alive. That's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How can I survive this experience? Where do I live? How do I feed my kids? Like, it's that practical. Here's the trap. Ready? Because survival, once you've figured it out, feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where you just came from, you think it's good. So you start planning routes here. You're like, whew, okay, let's make this work. A few things start to happen. You start getting these small self benefits. You get to be right. You get your story. You get someone to blame. You don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. Should I trust you? Should I trust you? Forget I won't trust anybody. You get sympathy from everybody you tell your story to. So you start planning routes. Now that you're planning deeper routes, now the mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you deserved it. Maybe you're not all that, right? Deeper routes. Now, because like energy attracts like energy, now you start calling people and circumstances and relationships towards you to confirm this is where you belong. It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because you don't like it, but you have no idea there's a stage 4 and stage 5 waiting. You resign yourself to thinking, well, this is as good as it gets. I better get used to it. So here's where you start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, whatever it is. You do that for a day, a week, a month now to have it, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And I can see someone 20 years out and say, you know what, that drinking you're doing, that emotional eating you're doing, that numbing in front of the TV you're doing, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? They say, oh my gosh, that happened 20 years ago. Doesn't matter. They put themselves in a perpetual stage 3. Anyway, if you're willing to let go of the benefits and all that goes with it and grieve and mourn, a bunch of things you need to do, you move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo this betrayal, but I can control what I do with it. And I always use the example of, if you were to move into a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, your stuff's not there, it's not quite cozy yet, but it's going to be okay. When you're in that mental state, you start turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but you've stopped causing the massive damage you were causing in stage 2 and stage 3. You start making new rules, new boundaries. But what's so interesting about stage 4, if you were to move, you don't take everything with you, right? You don't take the stuff that doesn't represent who you want to be in your new space, right? Well, here's the thing. If your friends weren't there for you, right here is where you've outgrown them. And people say to me all the time, what the heck? I've had these friends forever. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. You're different. It's you. Anyway, you settle into that space. You make it your own. You're feeling okay about it. You can move into stage 5, most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercising. You didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now you do. Your mind, you're making new rules and boundaries and just based on everything you see so clearly, and you have a new worldview based on your entire experience. And the 4 legs of the table, remember in the beginning, it was the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
Wow, that was like a college class. That was awesome. I think, and it all makes sense. Like, there's no mumbo jumbo, it's all very linear, very specific, very interpretive to life. That as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the time. Well, I was in all of those stages at some point in time.
Yeah.
They're at different places in my life. And I think there's a stigma with, mental health. There's a stigma with depression. There's a stigma with being cheated on. So not on top of, is it whatever's going on inside of you from that betrayal, but it's that external stressors that come in that probably, and I don't know this because I'm a high school graduate, but I would have to say that there's probably as much, if not more, stress that's placed upon you, external stress, that causes the initial betrayal to be, panic.
Exactly. You're so right. And here's the thing. You've now been put into a club you never wanted to be in. You are, and besides that, there is so much shame with something that you didn't even do, you didn't even cause. There's such embarrassment, humiliation. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I wrote Trust Again. At a time where we need support the most, we're the least likely to seek it because of the shame and judgment of something we didn't even do. And it causes us to question, am I not enough? What didn't I do? And that's why it's so important, if you have to say it a billion times, it wasn't about you. Even though it happened to you, it wasn't about you. And it's so hard to understand that in the beginning. But that's really, really the case. But it is an incredible growth opportunity. But you're right. And it is there. And here's the thing too, like here I am, I'm a very private person. My whole story is in Trust Again. I'm out there sharing every single day. And so listen, this is the stuff that gossip thrives on. And I get hit with the trolls a lot, but people will judge. And I used to be that person who judged until I was in it. And now it's like, okay, let them judge. I'm trying to reach the people who need to see a living, breathing example of someone who's been there and back. And not only has a story, but did the study on it.
First of all, I love anybody that's willing to step into their truth and own it, and then put it out there in a public way. And one of the things that I've done in my life is lead with the truth, and I don't mind being public with stuff if it helps somebody. I have tens of thousands of views on videos and whatever, talking about my issues, things that I've gone through. I've stood on stages and cried in front of 2,000 people about the death of my brother, and relived his death all over again on stage, and happily do that. And when you write a book with all your, I sold drugs in high school. I broke in and stole stuff. I was not the most greatest teenager on the planet, and I ended up becoming a cop. So I mean, like, there's this. I don't mind.
And that's why. That's probably why. It's always because now we have that perspective. You know what dark is, so you can appreciate joy. It's like, I know what trauma is. I can appreciate health and and healing and wholeness from a whole other perspective. Most people try to just stay under the radar, right? And here, I'm going to give you another little hand thing here. They try to stay right here, right? And then trauma comes and it sends you right here. Now, here's the thing. People plant roots here. You're not supposed to plant roots here. Here's where you lick your wounds, you get yourself together, and you say, I don't care what it takes, but I'm doing this. Here's swinging to greatness. When you think of any thought leader of our time, they're not teaching anything from here or here. They've been here and they're like, screw that, I'm out of here. And whatever it took to get them to this, they're teaching us this.
Right.
That's all we're doing.
We have about 5-6 minutes left. I want to talk about something that really has just been, I've been waiting to ask this question. And I know we didn't get to the third thing, but I promise you, I want to have you back on because I want to do this more, because this is enjoyable for me. And it really makes my brain start to open up a lot. And I truly appreciate you being able to do that, because sometimes that's not always easy. Your kids.
Mm-hmm.
So, we talked before we went on the air, you're a mama bear who wanted to be near her kids. And that's why you bounced between New York and San Diego, because we're out there. And I can only imagine, when I make choices in my life as a father, most of my choices depend on, and the decisions I make, or how will it impact my kids' lives?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's business, whether it's taking risks entrepreneurially, whether it's as a cop and doing some dangerous stuff, or how do I talk to my children, or whatever the decision I'm making at the time, I really try to think about how it impacts them. How did, and I'm sure you have, because you're clearly very thoughtful in your words and caring about how to grow and heal. Mm-hmm. How did you get your children, or help your children, to accept, lick their wounds, and then transform in through trauma, to accept their father's betrayal, mm-hmm. the process you had to go through, and then I think even more importantly, and probably even harder, is mm-hmm. this constant living it as part of your life. This is part of your work. This reliving of that that really painful moment for them. How did that happen?
Yeah, that was a process. And it wasn't my, I felt like it wasn't my job to give him a pass. If he was going to fix the relationship with the kids, that was on him. I wasn't going to throw him under the bus, but that was for him to do. And he did. He even called all my friends and apologized for who he had been, who he temporarily become. So he had to man up in the biggest way. If not, he would have lost his relationship with the kids. That would have been his karma and what he chose to do. And he took that as seriously as trying to recreate a new relationship with me. It's a new relationship with the kids that he has spent time on his own, doing the work. On my end, you have kids, they're all so different. I have 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys. They couldn't be more different from one another. And on their level, in the way they needed to hear it, I was going to be there for them, make sure they were okay, talk about it. Some of my kids needed to talk about it way more than others. I have a son who's very charismatic, life of the party, everybody loves him, great looking guy, and I was worried about him. I'm like, what's going to happen with his ego? But he doesn't talk a lot. So I remember one to never forget, I do it on his own pace, right? And he comes to me and he goes, Mom, just want you to know, you never have to worry about me. You took a hit for the team. I learned so much. And like for him, that was huge. Some of my other kids, it was more of a day to day. How you doing with this today? What'd you learn? How you doing? What are you seeing? What are you learning from all of this? It was all different. And it took a lot. It took a lot. But now I can't believe how close we are as a family now. I mean, it's more fun than ever.
And I think that and it just comes back to the honesty component and truth, right? When you can lead with honesty, lead with truth, lead with love, lead with forgiveness, lead with compassion, and lead with understanding. But you have to go through all the work to ultimately get to where that's acceptable. All those things become accepted again.
And I wouldn't say I led with forgiveness. I mean, that did not come easy to me at all, because integrity is my number one thing. I live by, and so simply, if it's going to hurt someone, don't do it. Period. End of story. That's how I live. So, forgiveness did not come easy. That was the hardest thing I've ever done.
But you got there.
Yeah.
And I think, for everybody that's listening to the show today, one of the cool things about these kinds of stories, whether it's a mom who lost a daughter to opioid addiction or whatever, I've had the widest range of stories on my show. In your episode 116, there's a commonality, and it's the self-awareness, self-acceptance, the understanding that you have to put in the work. There's never a shortcut.
No.
Never in anything. I don't care what it is. If you get successful with a shortcut, you're going to end up failing in the long run. And you may have a quick hit, but at the end of the day, it's not going to sustain. And I've never, in 50 years of my life, I've never seen sustainability off shortcuts. And I was the king of shortcuts as a kid.
And there's a saying in our community, the PBT Institute, and this is a saying, I have been saying this my entire career, and this is my 30th year in business. It is so simple, it applies to every area of life. Ready? Hard now, easy later. Easy now, hard later. Take your pick, it's going to be one of those two. We go through the easy now, easy now, easy now. The hard later comes. But no one wants to do the hard now because it's uncomfortable. But only when you do the hard now do you get the easy later. I
was Tim. I don't know if you're a football fan or so. Tim Tebow. I was his bodyguard for 5 years. So,
oh wow.
I got to spend a lot of time with him, and one of his quotes is, "Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard." And I live by that. And I tell you, my son is going to be going to University of Maryland ROTC scholarship, and every day in my kid's life is you are going to be asked to go more every day, and going more is a gift. If you have the ability to give more, that's a gift. It's when you have nothing left to give that you got to be worried. When you can't give another second of your time, energy, or effort, that's when you need to be worried. So as long as you're constantly striving to be more, give more, do more, that's when you know you have more to give, and life has more to give back to you. So Thank you so much, Dr. Debi Silber, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You've been, first of all, insightful, courageous, brave, engaging, inspiring, all the words that Two Dates and a Dash is meant for. The show is you have two dates: the date you're born, the date you die, and the dash is the life that you lived. And you know, when your story finally ends, it's going to be an epic one. And I truly do appreciate you coming on and sharing the things you've lived through and the things you've learned from it with my audience.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's people like you who give people like me a voice. So I appreciate it.
Hang tight. We're going to talk off air. Everybody, thank you for once again listening and subscribing to the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. Debi, where can people find you?
They should take the Post Betrayal Syndrome quiz to see to what extent they're struggling. That was the third discovery. We'll get to that next time, but they can find that at the PBT, as in Post Betrayal Transformation, the PBTinstitute.com/quiz.
I'll make sure I put that link in the show notes so everybody has that. But everybody, life isn't easy, but it's not rocket science. There's a pretty simple formula to happiness. There's a pretty simple formula to getting along. And there's a pretty simple formula to trust and love. And if we just block out the noise, filter out all the distractions, and really focus in on the things that are important and meaningful to us individually, I think we can find a place that will allow us to hit that super high natural feeling of acceptance, love, and joy that we're all seeking. Everybody, thank you once again for listening to Two Dates and Dash podcast. Please go and subscribe and like and download. Go to my YouTube channel, Matt Cubbler, and hit that little bell dingy thing. And once again, go to Matt Cubbler if you want to get a copy of A Brother's Love, a memoir, which is my book about my brother Andy. Everybody, God bless, take care, and go out and be kind to one another.